and welcome to our virtual conversation with Sandra Cisneros. We are so happy to have her with us tonight, and we are able to have her here because of a generous contribution from Generac, and their community programs manager, Kelly, is here with us tonight, and she'd like to start us off with a few words. Kelly?
Thank you so much. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining Waukesha Reads and this live session. You know, Generac is honored to be the presenting sponsor of tonight's program, and we're really excited for this rare opportunity to hear from Sandra and learn more about a house on Mongo Street. And you know, for Generac, we focus on powering possibilities through our community giving, and reading is really critical and a lifelong skill that opens the doors to the pathway to possibilities. So we just felt it was a really nice fit. So we hope you enjoyed the book, and I'll know you will enjoy the event tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly.
All right, thanks so much, Kelly. As we get going, I just wanted to tell you all a little bit about the presentation tonight. So we are using a webinar format in Zoom, which means that all of the attendees can see and hear us, but we aren't able to see and hear you. So please put any questions that you have for Sandra down at the bottom of your screen in the Q&A section, not in the chat section. The chat section is disabled. And I also wanted everybody to know that we are recording the session tonight for library records. So my name is Corey Hall. I work at the library, and I am one of this year's Waukesha Reads chairs. My co-chair tonight, Carrie Pinkner, is here as well. And we are just thrilled to be welcoming Sandra Cisneros. She is an award-winning novelist, poet, essayist, and she wrote the book that we've all been talking about all month, The House on Mongo Street, which has sold over 6 million copies and has been translated into over 20 languages. And we're so honored to have her here tonight. So welcome, Sandra.
Thank you for having me, and thank our sponsor, Generac, for your generosity. So I'm happy to meet you and learn about your community. I learned how to pronounce your town yesterday, thanks to my friend who used to live in Milwaukee. So I'm so glad that one, I know how to pronounce it, and two, that I got invited to be back in the Midwest since I'm from Chicago.
Can you tell everybody where you're joining us from tonight? Because you have such a beautiful background behind you.
Yes, I'm joining you from my home in San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato, which is a colonial town that was founded in the 1500s before Mexico was Mexico, before the United States was the United States. It's a very old town, and it's in the state 100 kilometers from where my grandparents emigrated from in the last century.
Great. So Sandra, just to sort of get us going, would you give us a little background about where you were in your life when you started writing The House on Mongo Street, and kind of what inspired you to start the writing process on that book?
Yeah, I get two questions that everyone always asks me. One is this story true? Is Esperanza you? That's what I always get. So I tried to answer those two questions in the introduction. And so I'll give a brief, but you can look at the more detailed introduction so you can see who I was. There's a photo of me during the time that I was writing it. I began it when I was 22 years old, and I finished it when I was 28, thanks to our sponsor, the National Endowment for the Arts. So if the NEA hadn't given me a grant when I was that young, I might still be writing the book right now. But fortunately, they gave me the grant at a time that was crucial. I had started the book in graduate school, but I was in the poetry workshop, not fiction. So I could not submit my little stories as part of my graduate thesis. I just wrote it on the side to keep my spirit up. And then I went from graduate school to working in a community, in the Pilsen community of Chicago, a very poor community, an immigrant community for hundreds of years. And I started incorporating these stories of my students, because I was working with high school dropouts, and weaving in their stories in the neighborhood of my memory. So the neighborhood is my memory of a place I did live in when I was actually middle school till my freshman year of college. And the characters are a mix of people I witnessed when I was a child, and as well as students that were my students. If you hear sounds in the background, it's because this town is famous for fireworks. And every day there's fireworks. So don't think that's a gunshot. This is not Chicago. And those are just fireworks that go off for this. There's another one. Either somebody had a baby and they baptized them, or a saint's day, or because Day of the Dead is coming. Don't worry, the revolution has not started. It's okay. So anyway, coming back, the stories were, I was weaving them into a place in my memory. And, you know, I was having a hard time when I was in graduate school. I felt like a foreigner, even though I was born in the United States and English is my language. But if you've ever gone into the wrong bar or the wrong neighborhood or the wrong shop, or where people make you feel like you don't belong, everybody's had that experience. But imagine if you feel like that and you were born in the United States and you never felt that before until you went to graduate school. So I was 21 years old when I felt palpably a discomfort I had felt sometimes when I went into certain stores in Chicago. And I couldn't name what it was until I was in graduate school. And I thought, oh, you mean everybody has not had the kind of apartments that I had or the houses I've had. House for me was a key to talking about economic class. And there's this myth, you know, pull yourself up from the bootstraps. Everybody can do it. But that's not true. That's just a nice myth that we like to believe, an American myth that everybody can pull themselves up sometimes, but not always. And that reality of feeling the economic difference of myself and my classmates happened in graduate school. It was so uncomfortable. I felt like quitting graduate school and running out of the room. I almost did, but instead I was depressed and I spent the weekend curled up in bed thinking, what was I thinking? How did I think I could go through this program? My classmates, you know, even if they had a middle class background, still seemed wealthy compared to me. And I started thinking, how did I presume that I could write a book or have anything to say? I don't feel smart enough, like that. You know, you start having this sense of low self-esteem. But the fortunate thing, and I think this is really good for women to hear, the other side of shame, you know, the shame I had carried in college, and shame sometimes when I went to certain department stores or certain suburbs of Chicago, suddenly I thought about it and realized after a weekend, so it was a very short period of gestation, why have I never seen a book written about my neighborhood that's written with love? Why have I never seen a story about my relatives and that's written with love, that's written in the newspaper or a magazine or an article that doesn't just show the negative parts of my neighborhood, which every neighborhood has, but why doesn't it show the positive things and the wonderful things? And I'm almost done with my education. I'm in graduate school and I have never in the history of my education seen my community written about with love. And then I got mad. And getting angry is an emotion that sometimes we use against ourselves. You know, we see the victims of people who have manifested anger and don't know how to transform it into illumination. We see that happening with people going, you know, what we call postal, you know, with their jobs, shooting other people, or coming back to some place of work, or coming back to their school where they've been bullied, or where they're trying to express their pain. And we don't teach one another, how do we transform pain into transforming it into illumination? How do we work through that pain? And instead of targeting the people around us or ourselves. So my first inclination when I got upset was, I'm going to quit this program. I'm going to quit graduate school and go back and to Chicago and become a teacher. But when you think about it, that would be like shooting myself. So I said, no, I'm not going to quit the graduate program. I'm going to stay. I'm going to write the book that I've never seen in my education. That's what I'll do. And so what I did is I took my anger, it fueled me to do something positive. And what I learned from that is that, anger can be a wonderful energy. It can transform a city in like a nuclear reactor can into illumination, or if you let it go crazy, it can, blow everything up. So it's up to you. And I learned that, and it has helped me throughout my life. So that's how House was born, beginning from a place of negativity, shame, and rage. And when you write, you start from wherever you are, which is not always a good place. And you just keep writing and composting. You keep writing, you get all your rage out and all your shame out. You write all the things you're embarrassed and angry about. And then somewhere along the line, after years, it composts, and you suddenly learn something that is so positive and illuminating. It's like a little white flower growing from the garbage. And that's when you know you're done. So House, thankfully, was not finished when I was angry and ashamed in graduate school. It composted when I was working in the community with young people whose lives were harder than mine, breaking my heart, making me feel like a teacher. How am I going to save these kids? What can I do? I'm just their English teacher. What good is literature? Why do I even think I want to write on weekends? What good is literature for these kids? And I had that question. I would write their stories so that I could rest and go to sleep. And without knowing it, it would be like I would finish the book when I was 28. And it was 10 years later, when I was 38, that I started seeing the fruits of the seeds that I had planted. And what House taught me was that whatever we create with love, on behalf of those we love, with no personal agenda, I want to get an award, I want to be famous, I want to get invited to the Waukesha Public Library. No personal agenda. Whatever you create with love, on behalf of those you love, with no ego, siempre sale bonito. It always turns out well. I believe that's a spiritual law of the universe, because you're working from your heart. And I loved my students. I had no illusions that what I was writing was going to garner me any awards or any attention, any fame. I wrote it con puro amor, with pure love. And it taught me a spiritual lesson about the work we do on this planet, regardless of whether we're a librarian or whether we're a teacher or a parent or a mechanic or a politician. Whatever's done without ego on behalf of those we love is always going to turn out well.
Thank you.
A long answer to your short question.
All right. Sandra, thank you for that. Well, you're talking with librarians here, right? So we're curious, what role did libraries play, if any, during the time you were writing The House on Mongo Street or any of your other books?
Well, you have to know, and if you don't, you can read essays about my background in a book I wrote called A House of My Own. They are real stories of my life. And I'm a product of the Chicago Public Library. I had no book in my house that wasn't stamped property of Chicago Public Library. And my mom was a frustrated artist. She dropped out of school in the 9th grade and regretted it. And for her own sanity, to not go crazy being the mom of 7 kids, would drag us to the library every Saturday. And, some of us were dragged, but then we got excited once we were there. And for me, even before I knew how to hold a pencil and write my name, I had a library card and have always loved the library. So actually, the moment I imagined I would be a writer, was in the Humboldt Park Library on California Avenue in Chicago, and I remember the moment. I was looking in the old card catalog. If you remember, there were those long drawers, longer than your arm, and you would pull them out. And I was looking up a book, and at that time they were all with a little hole on the bottom of the index card that held them in place. And I was looking up a book, and suddenly I went past this card that was so soft, and I knew lots of hands had oiled that card, and I backed up and I said, oh, that must be a really good book. Then I thought, I want my name on a card like this, with all smudged and all dog-eared. And I believe that's how you make a dream come true. I tell children, okay, put your hand right here. This is your third eye, and this is where you make things happen first by a thought. So put your hand here and think about what you want for your future. Don't tell anyone. If you have 6 brothers like me, keep it a secret, but hold it here. And now walk towards that every day. You don't have to say it out loud, just hold it there. And that's what I did when I was in middle school. I said, I'm going to be a writer. And I held it as a secret and walked towards it furtively, secretly, never publicly. But it really begins in middle school. You have to plant that seed. Everything begins with a thought, the Buddha says, and we have to plant those seeds as positive thoughts when we're that young. Thank you, library.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, if you ever come to Waukesha, you'll have to come visit us in the
I
library.
would love to come to Waukesha. Yes, I will come.
Please do. We would love it.
Can I take the train?
To Milwaukee?
Yeah,
To
from Milwaukee you could. And we
Okay, because
take
I
the
don't
train
want
to
to
Milwaukee
drive.
and we'll pick you up.
Okay, I'm not a driver, so I'll come on the train.
Okay. Oh, Sandra, you have won quite a few very prestigious literary awards, and one of them was the National Medal of the Arts that you got from President Obama in 2016. Could you tell us about that day and how it felt to be recognized for your contributions to the enriching the American narrative? Beautiful pictures online of that day.
I have to confess, I almost didn't go because I felt very conflicted about appearing at the White House with, I'm the daughter of an immigrant, and my father served in World War II, and that's how he became a citizen. So I have very sensitive feelings about immigration and immigrants and the contributions immigrants have made. But during that presidency, more people were deported than ever before or after. So I feel always that politicians, when they take a picture with you, have more to gain than you do. And I thought, oh no, what if I'm just being, used as a pawn to say, look what I'm doing for Latinos, when the record is dicey, and I wasn't going to be able to speak or ask any questions. It's a very orchestrated event. So I was conflicted, and I had to think, do I go and get this award from a president who's deported more people in the history of the United States and make it all right? Or do I not go as a political position? So I went to my mentor, Norma Alarcon, a professor emeritus from UC Berkeley, also my early publisher. And I said, I really don't know what to do. And she said, this is a time in history when immigrants are having a problematic situation globally, and you need to go to represent, and you need to go. And my mother and father had both passed away. And I thought about it, and I said, okay, I'm going to think about the people I see riding a bus to work in the snow because they can't get a license. I know these stories and they break my heart. And I'm going to go for that guy who can't get a driver's license and is riding his bike in the snow. So I wore a Mexican Tijuana outfit. The Tijuana is an isthmus where you see Frida Kahlo wearing the lace collar, like, you know, like a flower. That's the outfit from that region. It's the most beautiful costume in Mexico. I said, if I ever get invited to the White House, I'm going to wear my Tijuana outfit. And I didn't get to talk. So I thought, everything I wear will be a fashion political statement. And everything I wore, from the flowers in my head to the necklace with my father's picture, my mother's photo, the Virgen de Guadalupe medal that had belonged to my mother, my cowboy boots, you know, the whole outfit was speaking for me. So, you know, I felt a little, you know, like, am I doing the right thing being here? But after I was there, I met like Philip Glass, the composer. I sat next to Mel Brooks, who made a pass at me. And I was like, you know, wow, Mel Brooks. You know, I had the greatest time. I got to see Rudy Anaya get his medal. And I just, you know, tears came in my eyes. It was so moving and beautiful. And I felt like this is bigger than this president, this event, for every artist that I'm meeting and the people I'm meeting today. And, you know, small me was like, I'm not going to go. But me representing the community, I'm so glad I went. It was a beautiful experience. And well, that's all I'll say.
Okay.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit about this question before everyone joined us. You are on record as showing your support for the title American Dirt by Janine Cummins, I believe it is pronounced. Do you believe that the controversy, there's going to be two parts to this question.
Okay.
Do you believe that the controversy has brought attention to the inequality in the publishing industry for Latin authors? And then one of our audience members wrote in, Sandra, what is the state of Latina writers here in the United States today? So similar, but a little
Okay.
bit.
I supported that book because I'll support every book that's about immigration and the border that I feel is going to help make awareness and tell the truth. So I read like 28 books that year that I blurbed. That was one of like 28. One blurb is already a lot of work. 28 is somebody who's really overachiever. And many of those books, not all, were books that were, some were documentary type books, some were poetry, some were novels, and some were written by Latino immigrants. And I blurbed them all. Maybe I over the top hyperbolic blurb, but I want people to read those books. And when you blurb a book, you don't know what the contract is. You have no idea how they're going to publicize the book. You don't know what the cover is going to be. You don't know the writer, maybe. Possibly you might know something, but usually you don't. And you're just looking at a manuscript to make a decision. Will I promote this? Is this important to promote at this time in history? At that time in history, yes. And I felt you could reach a lot of people that maybe, you know, I could not. And, you know, and change people's minds about issues of immigration. So I still stand by that book, especially since I was interviewing immigrants and interviewing some of the same people she interviewed to create fiction. I haven't finished my project, but I know some of the people she talked to from reading the book, and I know, okay, she went here, she talked to Pastor so-and-so. You know, some of the people she interviewed, I talked to as well. So I could see it was well-researched. And, you know, I don't know anything about her, but I think that the brouhaha happened because everybody was working from a well-meaning but wounded place. The people that were upset were wounded because why didn't they get that kind of money? You know, I have some suspicions, and they don't have to do with race. They have to do more with genre. A writer who writes poetry is not going to get the money of a writer who writes fiction. And a writer who writes a thriller is going to do better than, you know, writing documentary. It's marketing. And that's just the truth. I'm always being talked into write fiction because that sells. Big old novel is going to sell. So even if it's the same subject, they're looking at what's going to bring money in. It's a business, right? So I think people's complaints was valid, but wasn't valid for me was the language they used and the way they bullied a fellow writer. I'm always going to stand up for a writer. I don't care who you are. And if you cannot do that to a fellow writer, because her wound was one of having lost family members to a violent attack. That's why she was writing from that place that was truly hers, which is a victim. And so she can write about people who are victimized. And that's true of all of us. We use all our wounds. I got angry when I did my only interview, and I regret that I was angry because we should never speak when we're angry. But I was working from a wound too. I realized that, and I need to write an essay because I think every single person involved in the borlote, in the feud, was coming from a wound. And I think we need to process that wound and write about it before we have clarity. And there wasn't enough clarity. I think the publishing industry, yes, needs more diversity, but I think the way to, I'm a Buddhist, and I don't believe in any type of violent language, especially to another fellow writer who's trying to do the same work that we all are to bring political awareness of the border. So I think things got kind of broken, and I need to write about it some more and I need to take responsibility for my own anger and speaking too soon before I wrote about it. I stand by her book. I stand by all the books I blurbed, including the ones that were poetry and documentary. And I don't believe we should take back a blurb. I think if you write a blurb, if you're willing to write a blurb, you should stand by your words. And I'm going to stand by my words because I only write my truth. On the other hand, the publishing industry got a little kind of wake-up call with throwing battery acid, but I don't think the battery acid is the way to go. I'm always going to think that we need to work from some nonviolent place. I'm a follower of Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King and Cesar Chavez, and I certainly don't believe in bullying or being vitriolic against our colleagues. Does that answer your question?
Thank you for that very thoughtful response.
Okay, there was a second part to the question, but I can't remember if I answered it.
Let's see, it was, Sandra, what is the state of Latino writers here in the United States today?
Well, I think we, on the one hand, we made a lot of progress because when I began, I knew all the writers. There were like all 6 of them, And now in 2021, there's a lot of books out there that I have writers in anthologies and in marketing and all young adult and poetry and essays and mysteries and thrillers. And I don't know everyone. And that's exciting that I don't know everyone. So I think things have changed. If we want to see writers that are like making the big money, like American Dirt, then I would suggest that people write thrillers because that's what sells, no? Maybe do thrillers. And we also have to show that as a community that we support our writers, the way the Jewish community supports their writers or other, I'm giving you an example of a very bookish community. And I want to see Latinos supporting Latino writers so that the publishing industry wakes up because the language they understand is money. And that's going to have a very big effect on the publishing industry if you can organize and the community through the way that businesses understand purchasing power. Latinas especially understand from a businesswoman's point of view that Latinas are the biggest money decision makers when it comes to purchases. So if we can see that channeled into book buying, I think we'll have more leverage with the book businesses because they're not non-for-profit. They're there to sell.
Thank you.
Nice. Thank you. I have a question that's down a little bit of a different alley. We've been watching your Instagram account and your social media this last month, and we see that, Great pictures. Looks like you eat a lot of great food too on your Instagram account.
I sometimes embarrassed by how much I take pictures of food, but I get a lot of likes. So I know my followers are foodies.
Yeah. Oh, what I was really interested in is the opera that you're collaborating on the house on Mongo Street. Tell us about that. And do you know when or where it's going to be performed?
Yeah, I got a query from a composer named Derek Bermel in the New York area, and he sent me his music, and he proposed translating House on Mongo Street into a suite of songs for an orchestra. And I listened to what he composed, and it just brought tears to my eyes. And I thought, wow, yeah, I want to hear you do a suite. So he did a suite, and it premiered at Chautauqua in upstate New York, and at Yale, not jail, Yale, and the whole orchestra and singers. It was really cool. And then he said, why don't we do the whole book and expand it? And you can do the lyrics. And I thought, lyrics? I don't know how to do lyrics. And a librettist said, yeah, you know how to do lyrics. You write poems. That's all it is. Oh, I know how to write poems. Oh, okay. I think I can be the librettist. So that's how it started. And we've been working on it for 3 years, but not every day. You know, he's got his own job and I work on other books. So we've got to finish it this autumn so that we can workshop it next year. So I think maybe we're close to finishing it. Maybe I'm wrong when I see it on the stage, but I'm having a lot of fun because I've never done anything like this. I love opera, but I'm not, you know, I'm that well versed in opera, obviously. I didn't know, for example, that Chicago had a lyric opera house because I'd always heard opera in the park for free. And that's where, you know, when the family of 9, you cannot go to the lyric opera house. My mother would take us to Grant Park to hear opera. She was a big opera fan, like the mom in the house on Mongo Street. She took out records from the library and she would belt out these arias, you know, in the kitchen. And she was pretty good. So I have an appreciation for opera. And I just thought that Derek Bermel is the most fascinating composer. You can Google Derek, B as in boy, E-R-M-E-L, and put a house of my own, and you'll get this lovely soprano singing one of the compositions. So you can get a sneak preview of what Derek did. He took the text from my book, and so it's I guess it's my lyrics because I wrote the book. And he did the music, and it's really lovely. I'm truly excited, but I'll be more excited when I can tell you we're done.
Is there also a TV show in the works as well? I thought I read that also.
Yeah. But it's still a little, you know, lima bean. You know, it's not quite a fetus. It's very small and in process. And like it hasn't been sold because it hasn't, you know, the pilot is still being written. It's very, very early stages. I'm almost afraid of mentioning it because I don't want to have a miscarriage. It's so early in the process, and it would be great as a television show, right?
It would.
Yeah. I can kind of imagine, you know, well, I'm at the stage where it's so small that it's like in my imagination. I'm not writing it. I'm just the producer, you know, like I'll look at the script that they're writing and say, well, she wouldn't say that, or what about this, you know, kind of like an editor.
Okay, great. It looks, Carrie, it looks like we've got some questions. Q&A.
So does your family still live in the Chicago area? Yeah,
they do actually. Maybe only an auntie and some cousins live in the city. They can't afford to live in the city, you know, unless you stayed there. And my favorite brother, Kiki, is moving back into the city. Actually, it's really funny because my old neighborhood is in the Humboldt Park area, and my brother's moving back into the old neighborhood. So it's kind of, and it made full circle to come back. I come back to Chicago, or used to before COVID, on a regular basis. And some of the sad things that are happening with cities is like, the neighborhoods don't get better for poor people. And then poor people have to move out because they can't afford the taxes, and they get forced out into the suburbs. And then they have the long commute to get to work. And so that's the story of my family. So when I come to Chicago, my book was written in the late 70s, early 80s. I finished it in 1982, and it got published in 84. But it breaks my heart that, it's still relevant now, still, like the problems in big cities. And it's not just Chicago. I lived in San Antonio, Texas. I see the same thing happening. Everybody that doesn't have money getting pushed out of the great central neighborhoods. And as soon as they leave, then the city services get doubled, everything gets cleaned up. But when the poor people live there, the city services, like, police don't come when you call. My mom had to move because she got tired of people burning cars in the alley, or drunks crashing into her fence. She lived on the corner. And I got tired of calling cabs that wouldn't come, and they'd say, "Oh, we were there." I said, "No, you weren't. I was sitting on the front porch." So like the services you get when you're poor, even the grocery stores give you the worst products. So I see that happening over and over in Chicago, and happening in San Antonio, where I lived for over 25 years. So, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that House on Mongo Street is so current, even though I wrote about a situation when I was my early 20s, mid 20s. I'm 66 now. And, if there's one thing that I want House on Mongo Street to do, is to wake people up that they know the address and that they have a house in their mind. It might not be a house physically, but there's a wound that everyone has a special vision for, a wound that you were born with, that you see people from that community and you see that problem. That's your house. That's the address. It might be issue of disabilities, or the issue of bullying, or the issue of stalking, or whatever your issue is. That's your House on Mongo Street. So I hope the book, people don't just think, oh, it's about this Latina in Chicago neighborhood. No, it's about your life and your own issue that you feel tethered to, and maybe you want to avoid. And the book is telling you who's going to fix it. Not the mayor. What else?
Oh, so many. Corey, would you like to read one of these?
I know we're going through here. Let's see. So someone says, what recommendations or advice do you have for Latinas who want to be writers?
Right, this is for anyone, whether you're Latina or any ethnicity, or male. I would recommend that everyone understand from the get that you may never earn a penny from your writing. And you understand that you go into it understanding that you may never earn a penny, even if you're the greatest writer. If you are willing to go that route, fine. So rule number one, earn your own money. Make sure you are financially independent. So, make yourself as marketable, as educated as possible so you can get a job, because you may not make any money from your writing, and you may have to have 2 or 3 jobs. You might identify as a writer, but the truth is you're going to have to pay your rent and your bills with another job. Are you willing to make that sacrifice? If you're willing, and make sure, one, you make yourself financially independent. If someone else is giving you money, they have power over telling you how to live your life. So you want independence, earn your own money. Very important, even if you're married, especially. Number 2, this is important for women, but it's just as important for men as well. Make sure that you control your fertility. It's not Russian roulette. Your fertility should not control you. This is 2021. Think about what are your spiritual beliefs and your ethics, and decide that how you will control your fertility, because you don't, if you're a young artist, you can't be taking care of children when you're still a child. You've got to take care of yourself. So will you be able to afford to have children? That's a question. I was not able to. I couldn't afford the money nor the time. That was the most important thing. At 30, I made a conscious choice that in this lifetime, I would not have children because I couldn't afford it. The partners that I picked in my life were the worst father material. And if I raised a child alone, as I had stupidly thought I might, I would have to move back to my father's house. And I said, no. I worked really hard to have a house of my own, and I'm not going that route. So I will be the tia, I will be the auntie. And in this life, that's fine. So, the second point is control your fertility. This is 2021. It's not 1221 or 1821, or even 1921. So there's no excuse. And then the third one is, I know when you're young and, all these 2 years that we've been locked down, you think, oh, I wish I could go out and I wish I could go to the clubs. But actually, when we're forced to be by ourselves, is time the universe is giving us to nourish and nurture ourselves. I don't know about you, but when I had boyfriends, all I did was think about what they wanted, anticipate their needs, and to take care of them. So I think that's kind of part of how we're trained to be as women, like geishas, as opposed to, what about if I was a geisha for me? What do I need? What would I like? And when you're alone, that's what the universe is giving you, time to develop and take care of and luxuriate with discovering what your needs are. So I break it down to 3 points. Earn your own money. My mother taught me that. Control your fertility. And number 3, solitude is sacred. That's a gift from the universe. And you can read, you can learn another language, you can make yourself marketable for your day job. There's so many things you can do that you can't do if you're on, you've got somebody else to take care of. So those are my advice for all human beings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I ask the next question, there is a comment, a very nice comment on here directed towards you. I want this person to know that we will share that with Sandra after the conversation. So,
Okay.
my question for you though is, during your time as an author, you have had opportunities to speak at many different events and to people of all ages and backgrounds. Is there anything that you always hoped somebody would ask you about the house on Mongo Street that no one has ever asked? Or are there any special moments or questions that stand out?
Well, one of the things I think I've said earlier, but I'll say it again, is I want people to discover their own house on Mongo Street, their own address. What is the address of some place, some wound that you have, something that you're ashamed to talk about, some secret, that wound that you hold that gives you a special vision and you see others with that wound. If you've ever worked as a waitress, you see how hard that waitress is working and you give her a good tip. If you were an upholsterer like my father, you sit down and you examine whether the cushions you're putting a butt in was well made. There's all a special vision we all have, but I really think about how, sometimes we harbor things we wish we could forget that we can't talk about. And for me, I could never talk about that discomfort I felt about being poor and being made to feel less than when I went into Marshall Field or, Water Tower. And, that feeling made you feel it, it. Or when a teacher doesn't like you, it. There's all kinds of salespeople do it, hairdressers, when that feeling I could not name until I said house. I don't have a house. And that was my beginning for my economic awareness. Later on, there would be other awareness, female, Mexican, immigrant, all that. But I wish people would recognize that this book isn't just about this happened here to her. It's a Latina story. It's an everybody's story. And you need to think about what is the address that only you know. I call it a house, but it's a metaphor for some wound you have, some community you know, some story that has hurt you. And, to examine and think about that. And I want people to read House on Mungo Street that way, not as something that happened here, but something that happened to you. And you are Esperanza.
Great. I Sandra, if someone was introduced to your writing by reading The House on Mungo Street this past month, what would you recommend that they read next of yours if they were going to read a book of yours?
If they had someone who just broke their heart and departed in death, I would have them read Have You Seen Marie, which is a bereavement book. I think that would be good. A lot of us have lost people to COVID, and that's a book that has a very strong epilogue of how to survive alongside a death. Not to get over, because we never get over a death, but how to survive alongside it. If you're curious about my life, I would say read the essays, nonfiction, A House of My Own. If you want to see a book based more autobiographically, that's a novel, then I would recommend Caramelo. If you want to see what I wrote alongside House on Mungo Street, you could look at my early poems, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, that I wrote concurrently with House on Mungo Street in my 20s. If you want to see how I broke free from my censors in my 30s and got away from my teachers and parents and the what will they say and the neighbors, you can look at Loose Woman, which I wrote thinking I would never publish those poems. And that freed me to uncensor myself. So those are some of the books I would recommend. I have others. I have a new book of poetry that's coming out next fall. But I'm most excited about my newest book. It's only 51 pages. It's a novella called Martita, I Remember You. And if you're trying to learn a second language, the real cool thing is you can also read it in Spanish. And if you don't want to read it, you can listen to it on audio. I'm sure the library has it. I read all my work, all of my books. I record myself. But this is the first time that I've recorded the Spanish version, which was tricky because this story takes place in Paris with non-Parisians and girls from Italy and Argentina and Chicago. And so they have no money. And they're in Paris. So there's the misadventures of young girls in Paris. And I based it on a real people I met, cut and pasted together. And it's my newest one. And I think it's the most beautiful thing I've written, if I do say so myself.
And the library does have it. So put your holds on it, everybody.
All right. I'm just going to share one of the comments and then ask a few more questions here. Somebody shared, this is a wonderfully honest presentation. Thank you for this event, Waukesha Reads and Mrs. Cisneros.
Well, thank you.
Yes. Let's see, how do you feel your writing has changed since you wrote House on Mungo Street?
Yes.
My apologies if I pronounce this wrong. Greetings from a Queretana living in Waukesha.
I didn't hear you what?
I'm not very good at pronunciation, but I can spell Queretana.
Oh my God, I can't even visualize the letters right now. Just jump over it.
Corey's much better at it than I am.
Yeah, don't worry.
Queretana, perhaps? Queretana?
No sé. I'm right now, I can't translate letters because I'm so brain dead from answering. I'm trying to be so precise that it is the time of the day that I'm shutting down. No, don't worry about that. Well, but just give me the question again, please, Carrie.
Sure. How do you feel your writing has changed since you wrote?
Oh, the writing has changed. Yeah, that's a good question. I like that one. Well, if you look at this story, my latest, and look at my first, you'll see a lot of traces of the poetic language, the succinctness, a tiny story with each sentence compressed in like a poem. So there's a lot of things that are the same. But when I was writing House on Mungo Street, it was the first time I was writing a long story cycle. I'd written short stories. I'd never done a story cycle novel. So I didn't know how to introduce lots of people. And I didn't know how to work dialogue that well. I couldn't write a family with 7 children. That was my real reality, because I didn't know how to introduce that many people. It was just hard. So that's why the family is smaller. And I didn't introduce aunts, uncles, cousins, the extended Mexican family that you'll see in Caramelo. So each book, kind of brought me closer. And this, I think my writing has become more lyrical. I think it's lyrical in House because I was a poet, but it's more succinct now than Caramelo. Caramelo, I wanted to do the opposite of House on Mungo Street and write an experimental, big, messy novel, because people would look at House and say, meh, that's not a novel, and make me feel really bad, that's not a novel. So I'd say, okay, I'll show you. And that's why I wrote Caramelo, a big, fat novel, experimental, nonlinear, And then when I did that big one, they said, it's too long. I can't teach that in my class. So I thought, you can never please anyone. So, okay, I'm not going to listen to not readers, they were critics. I'm not going to listen to critics anymore. And I'll just do what I want. And, that's the wonderful thing of getting older. You don't care about what other people say anymore. And so I think this is like if House on Mungo Street and Caramelo, my 2 prose pieces, had a little baby. It has the succinctness of House on Mungo Street, but it has the density and characterization of a large novel. And it's a novella, and it's only 51 pages. So I think I was able to finally, didn't have to write a big unwieldy book. I didn't have to make simplistic with one narrator telling the story. I could have characters talking. I could create a more complex structure. And I think my writing's gotten better. I'm not exactly where I can say, yeah, now I'm a writer, but I'm getting there. I'm not the writer I want to be yet.
Okay, so we've got this question. It says, what do you recommend for teen Latinos as a follow-up to Mungo Street? We just read it in class.
Well, I think you would like the teenagers, they're like 20 years old. Does that count? I think they count. To read Martita, you'd like that. It's short. And it's about young girls traveling. And, I think that would be the right length for someone finishing House.
Okay.
There we go. All right. We just have a few more questions. It is getting close to 8. So one of our audience members is asking why you are living in Mexico rather than Chicago or San Antonio.
Well, have you ever spent the winter in Chicago waiting for the bus? Then you would know why I don't live there. Everything was so exhausting. I didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't live in by the lake. No, I lived in dangerous neighborhoods where, you had to self-curfew because, if you didn't get home early, you could get shot. Or you might see a rat, things that's scary. And so everything cost physically too. Like it cost, I forgot to go get bread. Oh, I got to get in the car. I got to drive. I got to walk from my park car to the store. And then I got to worry when I lock the car door and look around me because I'm a woman, and then if I can find parking, then I got to figure out like, how am I going to dash from my car and have my key in my fist? And am I going to run in the middle of the street in case somebody jumps out from a parked car? That's the reality. If you live in a city and every city, but especially in poor neighborhoods. So it's really overwhelming and exhausting, and it left little energy and time to write. I moved to San Antonio, Texas, because I thought I would be there. I got a job interviewing on the phone. And I thought, oh, I can get out of Dodge and then I'll go to San Francisco. But it turns out, I would go to California and it wasn't for me. And I would earn my money in different universities for a semester. I never got like a full-time job. I would always just come in, semester here, because people didn't see me as a real writer. I was a small press woman of color, and that was not a real writer. My house on Market Street came out of the University of Texas, small press, Latino press, in the original edition. So, I felt like I could earn my money, with part-time gigs here and there, and then spend it, lower my overhead by living in South Texas. So that's what I did. And I lived there for a long time. It was affordable. Eventually, it was so affordable that I could even afford to buy a house, which was way beyond my dreams. And buying the house tethered me there for a while. And then I suddenly started earning from my writing when I was about 45. I couldn't believe it, that I was beyond what I could imagine. And but then San Antonio had started having the problems that Chicago had. It got overdeveloped, noisy, not safe. Even though I owned my own house, I couldn't control my backyard, and they developed the river and people would be back there at night. And it was scary. I didn't feel safe as a woman, and everything got really high priced very fast. I tried to copy Austin, and cars and noise and things that are counter to a creative spirit. And then one day I got invited here by a book festival, and it's the state of my ancestors. And I thought, oh my God, it reminds me of the island that I lived on with my NEA grad. So I finished a house of my own here, and I sold my house, and that's how I was able to move here. A lot of expats live here from Canada and from the United States, and I thought, if they can do it, and they don't even speak Spanish, I think I can do it. And I've been here 8 years now. I'm a dual citizen, so I could live in both countries.
See, I'm just looking at a couple of the questions here, and someone asked this also in one of the discussions I went to. Why did you decide to write the book originally in English instead of in Spanish?
Because my Spanish isn't that great. It's gotten better in the 8 years, but my Spanish was frozen to like a girl's Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if you're English, you learned it with your father when you were a child, and it froze in little daughter English. You can't talk about politics. You can't talk about literature. Mm-hmm. You cannot talk about lots of things. Sexuality, forget that. You cannot talk about those themes because your Spanish is frozen as a girl child. So that's where my Spanish was. I can chatter, but I make a lot of mistakes. Like even today, I was trying to say, how do you say landing? How do you say contractor? Is that how you say it? I'm always learning words because my vocabulary, I have to say things like, how do you say the man who builds the house instead of saying, how do you say contractor?
Mm-hmm.
I have to make circles. So you can't write if you only have 12 crayons. You got to have 599. That's why I don't write in Spanish.
Sure.
I'll just share one comment. One of our attendees wrote, love so many of your works. Looking forward to your newest. Met you 20 plus years ago at NWSA conference in Illinois. I cried. I have family I'm going to say it wrong again, San Luis de La Paz, GTO, and my uncle planning to retire in San Miguel. Thank you so much for tonight.
Oh, thank you. Well, I hope I make you cry when you read my work, and I hope I make you laugh, because to me, the definition of good story is if it makes you laugh and cry, because life is hilarious and heartbreaking. And those are the kinds of stories I try to write.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. It looks like we're at 8 o'clock. Sandra, we're so happy that you joined us tonight.
Well,
And
thank you.
And thank you very much. We received the book plates today, the signed book plates. So anybody who's watching, please stop by the library and pick up a signed book plate for your House on Mongo Street book or any other of Sandra's books that you have. We're happy to give them away. So thank you so much for sending those to us.
I signed 10,500 book plates. And I watched a lot of movies when I was doing a lot of Netflix. And I got my arm all messed up. I had to go to acupuncture after signing, but I'm happy to do it because it was a great solution to how we can get the book signed without me physically being there.
Right.
Thank you. I really have to thank your community and the public library. Public libraries for people like me were so important because they gave me a house for your imagination. I lived with 9 people and 6 noisy brothers. And the library for me was a place where I could imagine becoming a writer. It's where it was born. We know from people that are living in crowded situations, or people who are homeless, or people who do not have the house of their own or house of their dreams, how important libraries are. So I want to thank librarians, especially during this time, for the wonderful work you do. I propose that the statues that are coming down, that they melt them down and make them into librarian statues and put them up there for all the work you do.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
Are we at the end? Can I bring my secret out now?
Yes, please do.
Yes. Yay.
This is my Mexican hairless. She's a mix of a Xoloscuincle, like the one in
Oh,
it's like the
she
Day of the
was
Dead
so
dog, and she's mixed
good.
with a miniature Chihuahua. And she sleeps through all my Zooms, but I bring her out at the end to say hello and goodbye, Noe. Say hello and goodbye.
I was going to say she was so well behaved.
Yeah.
Very well behaved. And she always wants to be on my lap when I'm writing, and writing such solitary work. So I'm so happy that she helps me to keep me working.
So,
Thank you so much. Also, I want to add, if anyone had a question you didn't get to ask, or if you thought of it later, you can always write to me and I answer all my mail on my webpage. And you can also alert me whether you would like the letter to be private or public. And you can follow me on Instagram. But for questions, it's best to write to me on my webpage.
okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
you.
Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate it. We've had a lot of fun, right, Noe?
Oh.
Such a treat to have you join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You
You
too.
too.
Bye. Thank you, Waukesha, for selecting my book and for reading my book. And I hope tonight's conversation will help you think about your own house, the own address, and issues that you feel are vital to you in your life at this time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.